Hi, I'm Mindy Lehrman Cameron. I'm an architect and an artist, and I have some amazing friends. So I've decided during this pandemic that I would interview my friends and share their stories with you. So here goes. Interviews with remarkable women. Hope you enjoy them. Madeleine,
Hi,
hello.
Mindy.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
Yeah.
It's these are definitely challenging times, but we're adaptable creatures.
Yes, thank you. Humans, we're going to adapt. I just realized with a flash that I know some remarkable women, and you are a remarkable woman. So, and I love you, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I really don't. I have no idea what this is going to be. You inspire me. So I think you're going
Oh,
to be inspiring on this interview, and I think it'll be great for other people to hear what you have to say. Madeleine Smithberg, you transitioned recently in the last few years from a life in Los Angeles to a life in the Pacific Northwest. And you had been a writer and producer on some of the most influential and preeminent shows in the world, comedy shows on TV. You've been working as a chef in the Pacific Northwest. And now you've become the host and producer of your own TV show, which is a TV channel, Mad in the Kitchen, of
that's
which there are how many episodes now?
I'm just finishing up episode 8,
But I do know that it was not an easy transition for you to move up here.
which I call it a pivot,
Okay.
and I'm pretty astounded myself because there have been a lot of hurdles in the process of pivoting. I moved to the Seattle area, as you said, from Los Angeles, but in the larger scope, I'm a New Yorker and always will be, second generation. But I did live in Los Angeles for 14 years and raised my son there.
How did you get into TV in the first place? What?
Well, I had done a semester in Italy. I was an art history major in college, and I did a semester abroad in Siena. I lived with a family, and we traveled all over Italy with a program to, see art. There happens to be a lot of art in Italy. I don't know if you've heard about it,
No.
but it's kind of a bit of a treasure chest. And but the funny thing was that at that moment, my passion for food, which had been ignited when I was 12, and my parents took me to France in 1972 for 7 months, and I ate something called caille au raisin, which is quail with grapes. And from that was like a moment that changed everything, because from that moment on, I would wake up, and I still do, every morning deciding what I'm going to cook. And I went and did my semester abroad in Italy, and that sort of took what the little bird in France had started in 1972 and blew it out. And I lived with a woman who woke up every morning at 5 and started the sauce for lunch.
Hmm.
And I would go do my classes from 9 to 12, and I come home at 12:30, and there'd be this gigantic spread every day of the most beautiful food made with so much love and really time consuming. Like, no one in America would make something that took 4 hours on a Tuesday.
Right.
It's like, but this was her job and her life. And so when I came back from Italy, I was pretty fluent in Italian, because I decided to spend all of my time surrounded by Italians rather than the other Americans that were on my program. Like, I can see them at home. And when I got out of school, I heard rumors that there was an office of Italian television, RAI, in New York. And it was kind of the thing where I sent them a resume and the phone rang. Like, you say in New York, you order Chinese
Not
food.
Italian. That is not.
No, it's not very Italian, but they were desperate because it was a lot of political appointments. But I was I was American and I had American work ethic, but
Mhm.
I could communicate with them and back from whoever we were trying to get for different shows. And so it was just baptism by espresso. I was thrown in so far above my head and my pay grade just because I was the only one that didn't need a 2-hour lunch
Mhm.
and didn't need to like talk to Rome for 3 hours every morning to like make use of the free line.
Mhm.
And I didn't need, just was so many things I didn't need. I just was hungry for experience and I wanted to succeed. And they gave me a chance to really do that. And by the time I was 2 years out of college, I was producing a 6-hour live salute to Rye, which is Italian TV, at Avery Fisher uh, Hall, which is part of Lincoln Center,
Yeah.
with you know every top performer from Italy performing, and then 2 chefs. There never should have been, but there just were, and so I had to navigate around that. But part of what I ended up doing the last year, I was the United States Bureau for a 6-hour live Sunday show called Dominica Inn, which means Sunday at home. And it's like if you take an institution such as, Ed Sullivan, this was that on crack. There were only 4 channels. We were 3 of them.
God.
And every Sunday, every home in Italy had this thing on in the background for 6 hours. And they were obsessed with what they called Americana. So I was going to press junkets. I was interviewing Sylvester Stallone and Jeff Bridges and Kevin Bacon and Jane Fonda. And then they would cut me out and put it on a giant screen and put in diretta, which meant live. So they would pretend that it was a live satellite when it was really just me in a
Right.
hotel room with the celebrities. One thing that they were really obsessed with was just anything unusual. And so I started sending swimming babies to Rome. The kids, once they get in, really take to it. And they swim through this little course of hoops and things. And so they went to Rome. And I had a guy that got in a sleeping bag with 35 venomous uh, snakes.
How did you find him?
I don't remember. There was no internet, so it was a lot trickier then to find this kind of stuff. But somewhere along the way, I had heard rumblings of this man named David Letterman, who was apparently on TV at 12:30 at night. And one night, school night, I said, I gotta see this guy. So I stayed up way too late. And when I saw the show, it wasn't like an entertainment experience. It was really a calling. I felt like I had been called and no one could understand, but I needed to work for that show.
Right.
And so I mounted like a campaign and it nothing happened. And then it happened.
How long was the campaign before
A
it?
year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. But they
And did you just keep battering them
I
with
know. I went to see 2 tapings. We had a deal. RAI had a deal with NBC,
Mhm.
and so I went to a couple of tapings, and I sent resumes to anyone that would, and I got rejection letters. And then I thought, you know what? I'll do this job for Dominica Inn. What else can I do? All I want to do is work for David Letterman, and instead, I go back for another round at Rye, where I'm the United States Bureau for the 6-hour long Sunday show. And in, I think, February of 1986, I went to an opening of Robert De Niro Sr. who had been a friend of my father. My father studied painting with Hans Hofmann in Provincetown, and all of his friends were artists, and Bob De Niro was his pal. And I go to this opening and I meet this guy, and he's super cute, and his name's Sam Packard. And the next day he calls me and we go out on a date, and then we start dating, and then we fall madly in love. And at the end of the season of the show I was working on, Dominica Inn, they sent us 2 business class tickets, which would never happen now. And they flew both me and Sam to Rome, and they put us up in the Hilton, and we went to the final show, and there was a party. And then the host of our show, my show, Mino D'Amato, offered us the use of his house on the Mediterranean. So he took us and set us up, and Sam and I spent 5 nights in paradise. There's incredible photos of diving into crystal clear blue water, and then we would walk up the hill every night and have pasta with seafood and drink a lot of wine. And then he had to go back to go to work, and I was going to go instead to Tuscany to meet my parents, because my parents had bought a house in a tiny village 21 kilometers southwest of Siena, but they didn't speak Italian, and I was going to help them buy toilets and faucets and all of that stuff. So that's what I did, and I met my parents. And at that time there was no internet, there were no cell phones. To call internationally was like a year's wages. You just, when you were out of touch, you were just out of touch. And when I got back to the United States, he wasn't at the airport, and I thought that was a little weird. And then I got back to my apartment on Christopher Street, where I was living with my friend Susanna, and on my pillow was this note I mentioned before in her mother's handwriting, and it was on yellow label paper, and I picked it up, but I didn't look at it yet. And I called Sam from a phone attached to the wall to carbon date the story.
Yeah.
And I got one of those really long pauses that you kind of go, and then the words you never want to hear. We have to talk.
Oh.
On back to Fran. And Fran had been the girlfriend before me. I remembered this moment so well because I dropped the phone, and it seemed to take forever to sort of make its way down to the floor.
Was it on a curly wire?
It was on a curly, wire, and it was kind of unwinding. And I was gonna vomit, and I couldn't breathe, and the room was spinning, and I knew I needed to cry. And then something told me, look at the paper in your hand. And I pick up the paper in my hand, and it says, call Darcy about a job at Letterman. So I literally,
yeah.
I had a moment that I call an emotional wash.
No.
It was
more like an emotional type.
I called it an emotional rainbow. It was like raining and sunny at the same time. It was like I was the saddest I'd ever been, and my heart was broken, and yet my dreams had come true all in the same nanosecond.
Right.
So I never processed it. And then I get the job, and I start work, and my career takes off.
So at Letterman, what was your job? What did you
I was the human interest.
Yeah, because you had water babies and men and
it led right in. So when there was a job, I was the first, and as far as I know, only person they called.
Good.
And I had to pitch 30 ideas. And the final meeting was with David Letterman himself. And I told him stories about working with Gina Lola Brigida, who had been a correspondent on my show, and how challenging that had been. And when I went back to my office at RAI, the producer called me and said, I don't know what you did in there, but you got the job. And I jumped so high that I sprained my ankle.
Oh, no.
I was limping for a month. But that would start, and I would be there 6 years. And so I was the human interest booker and producer. And that I did without the internet. I subscribed to 35 newspapers, local papers every day. I had the world's weirdest Rolodex. I knew every tiny fair and exhibition center, and I had stringers who were TV and print reporters from all over the country who I would just call and make friends with and send them. I would have, these little cool Rolodex cards, the Museum of the Obsolete, my name and the logo of Late Night on them.
Right.
I'd send people T-shirts if their people got on the show. I always say that my time at Letterman was my graduate school.
Mm-hmm.
My joke was when I became a showrunner on my own, which was the Jon Stewart Show on MTV, I had only been a segment producer. I had never run a team. And so I thought I need a philosophy. And so that philosophy, and look, Morty and I are still very good friends. He was my boss, Robert Morton, but he wasn't that nice. And he really wasn't that nice to women. And so I would operate under the rule of WWMD, which is what would Morty do? And I would do 180 degrees different. And that's how I established my own style of leadership. I stay at Letterman 6 years, and I'm producing among other things, I'm producing all the cooking segments. So I'm essentially having private lessons with Julia Child and Jacques Pepin, Paul Prudhomme, and David Boulay, and Emeril Lagasse, and Wolfgang Puck backstage before the segment.
Right.
And it was incredible. And I had a friend named Elise Roth, who's still a dear, dear friend. And she said, leave your job. We're going to start a company. We're going to produce content, or TV at that point was content about food, but we're going to make it funny. And we can do this. We can sell shows. And so I said, sure. And I retired from Letterman.
Were you disenchanted with Letterman at the time, or what?
No.
Okay.
I was confused at how easy it was to get a show on the air. And I had come up with a concept for a show, and I had taken it to Jack Rollins, who was Dave's manager, who was Woody Allen's manager, amazing man. And I had said, yeah, I'm going to pitch a show. I just want you to know, so Dave will know, so nothing will come as a surprise. And here's the idea. And I handed him my proposal because there was no email yet. And he said, well, what if Dave produces your show? So Dave Letterman signed on to executive produce my project. And next thing you know, we've sold it to Fox, and we're having a celebratory meal at the Four Seasons. I had the duck with cherries. And I thought, this is so easy. You just have an idea and you take it to Jack, and next thing you know, you're eating duck with cherries. Now, the show never happened, but what it did do was convince me that creating shows was something that was very attainable, which it is not. I had, this absolutely flawless, effortless experience that kind of seduced me.
Mm-hmm.
There had only been men that were segment producers, and I was a talent coordinator, but I was producing all the segments. And finally, the man who was the segment producer left, and I got promoted, and another woman got promoted. And it was this big thing because no one had ever had the title of segment producer. There'd been a woman in all of the history of Letterman, and they gave us our raises, and we got an extra $100 a week, but we knew what the man had been making.
Right.
And it was a lot more than that. So yeah, there was a little bit of disillusionment.
Yeah.
So I left, but Dave was amazing to me, and he said, the door is always open for you, if you ever want to come back. And then what actually happened was, so I go off and I do the Daily Show, and then Craig Kilborn is leaving, and Dave calls me in, and apparently they've hired him to go replace Tom Snyder on CBS, and they want me to move to LA
Right.
and produce the show. And Dave says, it's not about the talent. We want you to create a format. If this guy doesn't work out, we'll get you someone else. You've made us very proud, and you've done something really original. Then I had this dilemma because I had just adopted my son, and I had been through the heartbreak of infertility, which spanned like 3 years. And then I finally got off the ride after 1 failed in vitro, 4 surgeries, 2.5 years of drugs, and decided to adopt. And 9 months later, my beautiful boy was born, and I adopted him at 2 days old, and everything changed. My parents were grandparents. Suddenly they're like asking me to move to California. My mom was upset that I was moving to the Upper West Side.
Right.
So I'm like, the Upper West Side's going to look really good in a minute, Mom. I didn't know what to do. I called my friend Jon Stewart, who I'd done the Jon Stewart Show with on MTV, and then we got syndicated by Paramount. And he was like, okay, let me ask you some questions. Are you proud of what you've created? And I said, yes. I feel like I've really broken through and created an original way to create comedy from current events and the news. And he said, do you like the people you work with? And I said, I love them. I feel like they're my family. He said, are you excited to come to work every day? I go, yes. I go to work every day, excited to see what the world has dealt us and how we're going to process it and make it funny. And during the course of those conversations, he decided, I think I'm going to host the Daily Show, which had always been offered to him, even from the beginning. But he hadn't been ready, because when the Jon Stewart Show went down, he was really injured. Jon convinced me that I should stay, and then convinced himself that he should come.
Okay.
And that's how he ended up becoming the host of the Daily Show.
Okay.
And I turned down the job at CBS with Dave Letterman, to my parents' delight. And suddenly the Upper West Side seemed remarkably accessible to my parents. I ran the Daily Show for its first 7 years, and there were many challenges and many really astounding accomplishments. The 2000 election will always go down in my personal as well as the collective history as some of the most incredible work that has ever been done in satire. We had like 35 days when we didn't have a president and nobody knew what to do. And in that moment, what we were doing became the only thing anybody could report, because there was nothing to report. And so, we came back after 24 hours from election night. We'd done a 2-hour live election night show. Comedy Central was throwing us a party. My friends and my brother were already at the party when Florida flipped.
Oh.
And in the middle of our broadcast, we're like, oh my God, this isn't going the way we wanted to go. So the next day we went on the air, and Stephen Colbert and Jon were smoking cigarettes. There were coffee cups all over the desk. Their ties were off, their shirts were disheveled. And that was only 24 hours in. It was going to go on for another month.
Wow.
And we did some incredible work. One thing that I'm incredibly proud of myself was I sent Stephen Colbert down to Florida to meet the voters that caused this indecision. And I came up with a game, and we went to a senior citizens community, and we offered 20 people a free lunch. And Stephen interviewed them, but the game was really to watch these older people try to decide. We gave them 5 menus and to decide what they were going to order was really the game, to show that These are the people that we've let decide our fate.
Decision, right? About
They
yeah,
can't even decide between Chinese, Italian, Greek, like,
right.
and it worked so well. And it was just this like classic piece, and that part was super fun. And
Yeah.
then we won Emmys, and all kinds of things started happening, and the show really, everything, there was a shift,
Hmm.
and we went from being this outlier to being I guess an inlier. I think I made it up, but we were
Yeah.
right. We became the story,
Okay.
and everything changed, and not always for the better. Success has a way of really freaking comedians out. And I had been on the similar ride with Dave Letterman, and I got in under it where the show was still a little bit in the fringes. And then all of a sudden it became this huge success. And comedians, by definition, are self loathing.
Yeah.
Like, it's just part of the gestalt. And so when you make a big deal about them and they get really successful, they always feel like they don't deserve it. And
Impossible.
that always creates a kind of, I used to say there was this gap between what the world thinks of them and what they think of themselves. And the larger that space is, the worse it is for the people that work closely with them.
Oh, interesting formula.
Yeah. It's a very, very special kind of dysfunction. And
Okay.
I think, as far as I know, I mean, I've just never worked with anyone that wasn't a comedian. So it just got hard. And then what really got hard for me was when that success happened, everybody kind of doubled down and worked 10 times harder. And it became much harder to like leave it at home and go home to my boy. And I felt like, God, I went through all of this to become pregnant and not become pregnant, but to be a mom and to become a mom. And I was missing everything. I missed first words, I missed first steps, and it felt wrong in terms of the trajectory of my life, which is not just my career. So after the 2002 election, I I retired.
Okay.
I retired with one goal, and that goal was to become Mother of the Year and to win a mug. My retirement lasted about 3 months,
Yeah.
and then I got a job in LA to go and to create and then run a show called Steve Harvey's Big Time. And so that's when I picked up. I dragged Harry. My marriage stopped being good. It had a while before. And he moved to LA, but we separated for like 6 months after that.
Yeah.
And we're really good now. Like, Jonathan and I are really good friends, and we're a really good team in terms of being Harry's parents.
Good.
And we sort of made it through some really challenging times. Anyway, so I moved to LA, and I end up, you know, getting the dream house in the canyon. I have the kitchen in my dreams. I refer to my house as an elaborate cabana because, as a person who grew up with winter,
Hmm.
uh, I couldn't believe that you could be outside in January. And so I spent a lot of time outside, just doing the things I'd be doing inside, but just outside with flowers and edible trees.
So, did you ever get bored with the repetitive nature of these beautiful, gorgeous, exceptionally paradise-like days in LA?
No,
Never got bored. And
no.
when you say you were working outdoors, were you working on projects for other people or were these independent projects?
Well, it was everything. I had my own company, Mad Cow Production Incorporated, and ran it. I with all. I always had a partner most of the time. It was incredible woman named Sarah North, and we had clients. We would, sell projects to networks and production companies, and there were so many, but we did one of my favorites we did for Bloomberg Television, and we actually went to New York and shot in the Bloomberg amazing studios, and that was called None of Your Business, and it was a parody of financial news that was commissioned by Bloomberg, and they hired me to create it for them. And we did one that was a morning show for Nick Mom that was called the Fifth Hour. So if Kathy Lee and Hoda are the fourth hour, this was the fifth hour, and everybody was drunk. We did a reality show with Cyndi Lauper called Still So Unusual. Another thing that I was super proud of was I created a show for Current TV, which was Al Gore's channel, and it was called Infomania. And the idea of Infomania was it was sort of where The Daily Show left off and diving more into social media in terms of just, you know, being overwhelmed by information and what kind of comedy can be inspired by that. We did a travel show called The Ugly American, which we shot in Artesia, which is Little India. It's like 100% Indian, about 40 miles out of LA. We did a late night show for BET, which was called Don't Sleep. And we were nominated for an
Did you name
NAA.
all of these? Did you name all of these shows?
That actually the president of BET named. He knew he wanted the show to be called Don't Sleep. I did name The Fifth Hour. I did name The Ugly American. I watched it again the other day, and it was beautiful.
Is it anywhere accessible? Can we watch
No,
it?
the whole tragedy was I was like lucky, and I mean that as unlucky,
Mhm.
that I had 10 years after a lot of, you know, just success that kept happening and happening and happening, even after I left The Daily Show. The industry changed dramatically
Hmm.
in 2008, and, you know, reality TV came in and the internet started, and people that I was selling to became incredibly cautious. We had probably 4 projects that were verbally greenlit, which means it's going to go ahead. And then they just, for one reason or another, they did not
Hmm.
happen. So it was a very frustrating time, and it was during that time that I knew that me and TV were kind of separating. We made a decision, and we said, listen, I love you, you love me, I've done some amazing things with you, and you've done some great things for me. I always felt like I could go lay down because I created The Daily Show, and in so doing changed the way that a lot of people, most of them younger, get their news or
Great.
process news.
You said early in the interview, and I didn't write down exactly how you said it, but you said it's like taking the news and boiling it down and making it funny.
To just watch it straight these days is really jarring.
Right.
I think you need the filter, and you feel safe because you know that, be it Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel or Trevor Noah uh,
Right.
or Seth Meyers, I think is doing great.
Yeah.
Their goal is to make you feel okay.
Yeah.
And so you kind of are like, I'm going to go with him on this ride because he's going to give me something that's going to give me an emotional release.
Right.
And I'm going to let him do that because otherwise I may not sleep tonight. Of all the things that I'm proud of, I'm really proud of what a positive impact I've had on so many people. I know how many young women I have mentored
Yes.
and trained and inspired, and they've gone like, this industry of television is littered with my former interns and assistants, and they're all in positions of tremendous power. There's this woman, Jill Lederman, who was the showrunner, the executive producer of Jimmy Kimmel. She just retired because she has a little boy, and just like me, she feels like she's missing his entire life, which was why I left The Daily Show. I was like, what the hell?
Right.
He's got leg hair, you know, and I haven't even seen him. And Jill, you know, I am her mentor. There's no question.
Right.
And that means more to me than anything.
Amazing.
I've always been really conscious of wanting to be a leader and a teacher and a mentor.
Right. Right.
And I also really respect everybody who works with me. I've always said that television is a team sport. It's like an orchestra.
Right.
And that as the executive producer, showrunner, or conductor, I'm only as good as the weakest link. One of the things that I think I do better than a lot of people is I build teams, and I am able to spot talent in unusual places and put together groups that make comedy very well. And the team on Infomania was just adorable. And it was great for me because I had done Steve Harvey's Big Time. It went 2 years and it brought me out to LA. But then when I got hired to work for Current, I commuted to San Francisco for like 6 months, and they put me up in the St. Regis, and it was great at that point to feel the old girl still got it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you kind of think, okay, the Daily Show happened and
Right.
it was magical, but could I ever do it again? And with Infomania, I really had the sense of, oh my God, I've built a little human powered comedy creating factory.
Yeah. You. Yeah.
Yeah.
Since you were talking about how you were hungry as a younger person and how food came into your life, and you also mentioned hunger in terms of being ambitious in your career and how you saw this thing that was really yours and went to get it. And what I want to do is bring that around to what you're doing now, which is dealing with food. So the pivot not only locationally, but also vocationally.
Vocationally, and the sort of idea of metaphorical hunger and
Yeah,
actual hunger.
exactly.
My emphasis of my life became much more about my life. And I would have a standing party every Sunday that was called Super Sunday. And Harry's friends would come over and their parents would come over. Everything was just amazing. And I would cook. Every weekend, I would just do like an amazing spread. And it was like a movable feast. It was every Sunday. And there were some really, really wonderful years in there. My parents end up moving to LA and they go into assisted living, and my dad has a very sad last 2 years where he's got Parkinson's and Parkinson's dementia, and he breaks his hip twice, and there's sepsis, and my mother is falling into her dementia, and I've got the kid in school, and I'm trying to keep my company alive, and I'm like trying to keep the house, and I like imploded, and I decided to sell my house. And it was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but also one of the best,
Okay.
because I needed to be there for my dad. I needed to help him die and be as close to him during that time as I could be. And Harry and I moved to a really sweet house with mature citrus and
Where?
beautiful backyard in Sherman Oaks. So then Harry finishes high school and he's getting ready to go to college. And my dad has died. And I'm having a very bad string of just disappointment and bad luck. And the woman that I'm renting the house from decides she wants to come home. And I don't know where I'm going to live. And Harry's leaving, which is a gigantic blow to me because he'd been my life for his entire 18 years. And I got so sad that I remember this. I remember laying down on the floor and sobbing because I couldn't see a future for myself. And the next day, I got a call to go to New York to be the executive producer of National Geographic Explorer. So I go to New York for 6 months. And during that time, I got 2 visits from Sam Packard, the man who had broken my heart in 1986 and had found me on Facebook. And he came to see me not once but twice in New York. And at the end of the last trip, he said, "Why don't you move to Seattle?" And I said, "Okay." And then I realized I had never been to Seattle,
Yeah.
and I got on a plane.
Uh-huh.
So I've been here 3 years. It started in April. And when I first got here, I was trying to continue like developing TV shows, blah, 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 blah. And it just, things were looking good. I had 3 shows about to go. And then within the span of like 3 weeks, they all disappeared. And so then I was like, well, what am I doing? I've moved to this place. There's no light. It rains every day. Sam's at work. This is so depressing. But Sam had given me a cooking class for Christmas.
Smart
And
man.
I took something called knife skills.
Risky that this man comes back into your life
And gives me a knife skills class. Not lost on me.
Okay.
And the chef that's teaching it is very nice and very knowledgeable, but he's low key. And the comedian in me is like, this needs some help. So I'm laughing and I'm entertaining the troops. And at the end of the class, he calls me over and I think, busted. He's going to tell me, what were you doing? That was so counterproductive. Instead, he says, have you ever taught cooking? You have an amazing personality. You clearly love food. I run a cooking school in Seattle. We do corporate team building. We can train you. And there came my pivot. I started working at Blue Ribbon and I became Chef Madeleine. And I started at the bottom. After being at like the top of a field, I went to the bottom of a field. And it was so stressful and so challenging and so humbling. And then little by little, it started to get better. And I started winning the little team building competitions. And I embroidered my name on my coat. And every time someone said Chef Madeleine, I just giggled a little bit inside because I knew it had been something that had been coming since 1972 in France. But I hadn't like followed the thread, but the thread had never left. And Sam and I got married and everything was great. And then the pandemic came. Now we go to our honeymoon in quarantine. And my job is gone. Blue Ribbon shuts down. And I'm in constant contact with all the chefs. We talk every Wednesday. And they go, it's never coming back. Like the corporate team building is a thing of the past. Like it's never going to be. So I am thinking, look at my luck. I've pivoted to something that's evaporated. Mm-hmm. And once again, I got very sad and very depressed. And then one day, it struck me that this was in my control. And I put my phone on video and I handed it to Sam. And I said, get over here. We're making some pasta. So yeah, I'm about to release my 8th video. I just shot an extended interview for a trailer. I've been on a Portland TV station 3 times cooking, AM Pacific, AM Northwest. I have a publicist who's helping to book me on channels across the country. I have an editor that works with me and also supports me technically. I have a producer, a music producer, engineer who's helping me do new music. It's just been an incredible ride. And the response to the videos has been really touching. I feel like I found a niche, which is I'm almost like I'm the remedial cook. I'm not in a fancy kitchen. I'm you. Right. I'm you with a little bit more incentive and a little bit more enthusiasm and a little less fear. And I make it really, really attainable. And people are cooking it. They're making the recipes. They're sending me photographs. And I'm actually going to be on the Young Turks because one of the guys I hired right out of college now hosts a show on the Young Turks, and he wants me to be on as his guest. I'm 60 years old, and if this is what 60 is,
Yeah,
bring it on.
exactly.
Bring it on. No, I feel amazing for 60, and I feel like because of the pivot, I feel like my life is at a new beginning, and I feel like my pivot has pivoted. It's all a work in progress. Right now, I'm doubling down on the cooking
Yeah,
and just really enjoying being able to be in control of my own destiny and being able to do it from my dining room table.
and with Sam.
And with Sam, Sam does camera.
Yeah, which is very nice.
He's a great support system.
Good, good.
All
Well,
right.
I love you so much.
Oh, I love you too.
So thank you for doing this.
You're so
What
welcome.
we'll do with it, but thank you.
I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Madeleine. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Mindy.
Thanks, Madeleine. That was wonderful.
You're so welcome.
This is important if you're interviewing. Wait.
Yes. Oh, that sort of seals the deal.
Yeah, okay.